Is this thing on?
Hello, and welcome back to the SLC Voice Podcast. Podcast by students, for students. My name is Brian, as you may know. And today I did an interview with Chef Ryan Brown. He's one of the professors in the St.LawrenceCollege program. It was a fantastic conversation. We talked about his start in the culinary field, some things that he likes to cook, some things we don't really realize about kitchens. And then we just kind of got a nice little tangent about just cooking culture and what life as a chef is like. And I think it's a really great bit of knowledge for anybody that everyone loves going to restaurants. So understanding what's going on behind the scenes is fantastic. And for anybody that's interested in cooking or food or just learning, I think there's some really great little snippets in there that anybody can take, even if you're not like a foodophile. So with that, please enjoy this interview. Welcome back to the SLC Voice Podcast. As you may well know, I'm Brian, and joining me today is Chef Ryan Brown. He's one of the professors at the SLC Kingston Culinary Management Program. He spent 7 years working overseas, and now he's spent the past decade teaching a whole generation of cooks here in Kingston. Thank you for joining us today, Ryan.
Oh, thank you very much. It's awesome to be here, and I'm honored.
We have I've had a lot of people from the business program on, just because that's who I know. That's who I've been dealing with recently. And as some people may know, I actually spent some years in cooking in the culinary industry. So it's fun to have someone like you on and just kind of go back there and get someone from some of the skilled trades professions, because it's an important industry and a lot of people don't really think about cooking a lot as an excellent career. But man, it's a beautiful career. It's a lot of fun. And I'm sure you feel the same way, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I knew from pretty much about the age of 20 that I wanted to be a cook and a chef. And
Okay.
I didn't really grow up with too much of it, but it really hooked me when I went to cooking school. So, yeah.
Okay. And so what drew you to that then? Like, if you didn't really have that as a part of your background, like what drew you to culinary school? Was it like a dish you tasted or something like that, or what?
Honestly, I started the way a lot of people do, just washing dishes in a restaurant, and I did love it. It was my own little station where I could, organize everything myself and keep it all, clean. And so, anyways, I remember my first kitchen I worked in, and this really tall German chef came up to me, and he played the part, right? He had the pressed white jacket, the long apron, the clogs that put him up about 2 inches, and he came up to me and he's just like, "Hey boy," I was like, "Oh geez," and he gave me a broccoli soup, and
Okay.
I was like, "Oh, so I tasted it, and it was fireworks. It blew me away, and I kind of looked at him. I was like, "How did you make this?" Like the color. It was so vivid green, versus what I grew up with in a can, right? So
Yeah.
It tasted so much like the essence of broccoli, and it was so smooth, and so it was just perfect. The seasoning, everything, and I was like, "You need to teach me this." He kind of took me under his wing, and him and my uncle worked together, so that was my in. So
that's great. I find that's one of the really common ways that people get into restaurants, right? It's just a job at first, and some people just get pulled in by it, and whether it's the food itself or the culture, and they come to love with it later. Like, I started working at Moxie's in Kingston when it was like tailing me working there, and I had some friends that worked there. It was just the same thing. It was a job, I started in dish pit too, and I feel like a lot of people do. A lot of great chefs do start in dish pit just because you learn you learn how to work in that environment there, and you learn that no job is beneath anybody. Dishes have to be washed. These things have to get done, right? And so people that kind of look down these dishes, I don't think they last long. You have to be really respectful of the people you work with.
And you kind of sneak peeks of what everyone's doing. You're like, what secrets can I get today, right?
That's just it. It's a great place to watch. And you have 5 minutes because you're ahead. You've already cleaned the dish pit. Oh, I'll jump out and start tossing some fries, and it's a great way to get in the line. It's a lot of fun though.
I do remember one thing too, where I always remember, and a lot of people I think may have this in common, or maybe not, I'm not sure. But I remember looking always at spice cabinets and dry herb cabinets, and you're like, oh my God, there's someone who actually knows how to use all this in the right quantities and the right combinations. And it's like, what kind of, it seemed like alchemy to me, like crazy. So that was another interest. to get me
So
in.
as an aside here, like on like, there's a lot of people kind of talking about some of the cultural aspects. A lot of people kind of look at savory chefs as, you know, kind of just winging on a prayer. Are you one of those chefs, or are you more like kind of recipe based, or what's your style with that?
I think based on my entire career, I've been cooking for about 23 years now.
Okay.
And I would say the first decade of that was easily just kind of going with it. And,
Okay.
you know, I would mess a lot of stuff up, but I was kind of like that. Okay, if it needs more seasoning, add it. If I need to alter something, you know, change it. And I would say I'd say the last 10 to 12 years, I really got into the baking aspect.
Nice.
And you just can't mess around with that. You'll have a certain formula. You can't add your salt later, right? If you forget it in a bread dough or a creme caramel or something like that, you miss the sugar, and it's like you can't do that. So what I tell a lot of students is they may not be interested in baking at all, but if you can kind of harness the skills that you would get as a baker or a pastry chef, and then take them back to the savory kitchen, it only makes you more versatile, and it makes you more valuable in the kitchen, to be honest. So yeah. Anyone who knows me now, they would say I'm very particular.
Okay.
I do like the more intricate things, but that's not to say that, you know, some of the most simple things can be the most difficult, right? Something like making the perfect pomme puree or mashed potatoes is, you can mess that up 100 different ways, but to get it bang on is easy, but tricky at the same time. So.
Well, the joke is always, you know, with French cooking, with mashed potatoes, all you need to do is like a half a pound of butter and a half a pound of potatoes.
Yeah. Just hide it behind the richness. Yeah.
Exactly. It's funny you say that though, because so I know a couple of people that are in the culinary program now, and they're all in first year. So they told me that like they haven't had a chance to have you teach them yet, but they've heard about your recipes. They've seen your recipes. So that's funny that you said that. I think that aspect of you has pervaded even the people that haven't even met you yet. So I think that's a great reputation to have. One of my last questions
sounds about right. What I've heard. In the first year, usually only there's so many of us teaching in the culinary program that I only get to about 50% of the first years, but we usually get them all in the second year if they do carry on. And it's I'm a slave for the metric. The imperial measurements, pounds and ounces, kind of throw me off. I can't stick them in my head, but there's no escape with metric.
We all have our little things. Yeah. It's funny, when I was in culinary school, one of my best classes was math, and I think that's kind of an indicator of where I went with my career now, where I'm training to be an accountant. And you were saying about the learning some of the baking aspects and like how it kind of can affect how you look at other things. I worked at Garde Manger at Olivet downtown, and so I was baking the bread and I was doing desserts and things like that, and then I carried that forward to other restaurants after. So I started kind of carving myself out a role in somewhat savory and somewhat some of the other aspects. And I think like learning that method of like keeping things really on track and knowing exactly what's coming up in those next like 15 steps, I think that's really helped me even outside of the kitchen. So yeah, I totally agree. Learning how to bake and learning how to handle that aspect and just the chemistry aspects in the organization, I think it's really, really crucial for anybody to learn, even if you're not going to do it on a day-to-day basis. And
the cleanliness, as you mentioned, if you can keep a clean station, and it almost seems like you can produce products and get through your day, and you're almost like a ninja where no one can tell you've been there. And that's, if you can do that. And I did not start that way. I was more like, give me every dish. I will just mess everything up and I'll clean it later. And, in the real world, you can't steal all the equipment from everyone every day. So
no, not quite. Yeah. Getting that meat together and like having a clean apron at the end of the night shows that you are on point. If you're putting it out, you still have the clean apron and your station doesn't even look polished, you're like, oh man, it's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. I definitely was not one of the cooks, hence not being a cook anymore. So one thing I do remember though is like on the line, like I'm not sure about the restaurants you've worked in, but a lot of the restaurants I worked in, music was a pretty common thing. So if you were like, the classic trapped in a desert island scenario, you can only listen to the catalogs of 3 different artists. Who would it be?
Okay.
I know it's hard.
A lot of people don't know that I was a drummer for about 7 years.
Okay, cool.
High school and college. So forgive me for this first choice, but I will have to say Pantera.
Forgive you, I'm down with it.
Oh yeah. I found being a drummer, the heavier the music, the more fun it was to the drum. You get, you cover yourself in cymbals, and I had well, I still do. I have a set of cherry red pearl drums.
Okay.
And so anyways, the first choice Pantera, just because we were in a a metal / heavy rock band, and it was awesome to do that. Second choice, again, I'm going to be all over the map here, but the second choice, and this wasn't age restricted or based or anything. I've always liked classical and especially swing music.
Okay.
Dean Martin. And so honestly, I would say Dean Martin. And going from Pantera to Dean Martin, it's kind of like, oh my God, what's going on?
I love it. Show some range. It's beautiful.
Also too, I did work in a restaurant where they would actually put classical music on only for service, and you would only hear the head chef. It was such a unique situation that, you could play whatever you wanted usually, and half the time it would be quiet. But yeah. And then the third one, it's not really an artist, and I wouldn't knock it until you try it. But if anyone has ever heard the audiobooks of Harry Potter by Stephen Fry, it has to be by Stephen Fry. There's another version which is not nearly as good, but he can do any of the voices, and from the first sentence in the first book till the very end, it's I would honestly just, it's hard to find, but if you can find it, it's days of listening. So
that sounds delightful. I'm of that perfect age where I think I was just about Harry Potter's age, as I was growing up for the first couple of books. So I'm 32 now. And so, yeah, I grew up reading those books. So it's definitely one of those kind of comfort going back ones. Once every couple of years, I'll spend a couple of days in the summer. I'll just kind of just burn right through. And that's, at this age, it's pretty quick read, but they're still so fun, man. They're just, it feels like welcoming back some old friends. It's just a beautiful story, and the story it progresses all through. And Stephen Fry's got a great voice, so I can absolutely see that being
yeah, he makes it. I mean, I was so hesitant to start it because I wasn't really hugely focused on it, and then I started listening to that, and I'm like, man, it was awesome. So
hey, we all have those little things in life, myself, it's I have some artists like that too. I have some books that are kind of comfort ones I go back to. And one thing I remember from the kitchen is just after a long day, sometimes it's been tough and you need a comfort dish you want to come back home and eat. What's that comfort dish for you? Okay, you don't have to cook for yourself. You can be there. You don't have to cook when you come home. I know how hard that is to cook. We never cook for ourselves, right? So if it could just be sitting there when you got done work, what would it be?
That's what it. Yeah. So if I'm going to be honest, usually it's going to be cereal, something that isn't. But I'll be honest. Anything. If anyone decides to cook for a chef, they're usually safe with that. I mean, that is usually the best thing, as long as it's something different that we haven't been making all day. It's the best thing in the world, and and it's much more appreciated too. I gotta say, my gal Emily, she was very nervous to cook around me and just kind of terrified, and I got it, but at the same time I was like, yeah, I can understand that, and it didn't take very long. She got her confidence and cooked, and she made some amazing things, and she was a really good cook. So I think that confidence going hand in hand with cooking, that it'll be more fun, it'll be more enjoyable, and it'll be a better product. I mean, I suppose it's the basis of culinary school in general, but I would say there isn't a specialty or anything I'm going after specifically. It's more the act of having someone just kind of cook for you.
Yeah, so, a dish that dish that someone cares about you enough to make and put some love into it, right?
It's always going to taste better than whatever you make, unless you're at work.
Okay. I recently reread Kitchen Confidential by Bourdain, because that book is just it's one of my comfort books. It's one of every couple of years I have to go back and read it. And I love the section where he talks about like the reason why restaurant food tastes better because everyone's just dumping just like pounds of butter and oil into things. It's like, you know, no matter if you go to a restaurant, like obviously it's better ingredients and it's well cooked, but the real secret is we're just adding just a metric ton of fat just into everything, and it's going to taste great because of this. But what can you do, right? So one of the things you brought up, you know, we're talking about how with cooks, we don't really cook for ourselves much. Like, what are some other kind of kitchen culture things that people might not know?
Well, I suppose I mean, a lot of people think of the darker side of it first with the culture and everything, where you picture like the, you know, the alcohol, the drinking and the drugs and the lack of sleep and working all the time kind of thing. Or you could look at, you know, it's always the perfect ambiance and the lighting and everything and the service. But for me, I would say the kind of like the culture that I was introduced to, strict, focused and demanding, I would say would be the overall thing that I kind of take away. So
I agree with that. It's I worked in some nice restaurants. I worked in some places that were less nice, and I found that like when you get to a certain level, the level of artistry and focus is required to really put out some great food. Even like I worked for a really nice banquet company. And even that, you might just be doing the same thing 500 times, but to have perfectly cooked like 6 different elements that are going to be on the plate, all of it, and then have to like to store them, having going on at the exact perfect time, 500 perfect plates. It takes some focus and dedication and some incredible teamwork. And I think that's one of the other ones. Is like there's the teamwork component of working in a kitchen. Even if you're on your own station, you're never truly alone because you're having to fire things at the same time for the window as people like across the kitchen. So just the level of communication is incredible.
Yeah, I found it was almost like a doorway into this exclusive kind of versatile club of exciting people where they would be, you know, they would be relaxing and partying during the 9 to 5 push for most people, right? And and I don't know, it was, and I suppose in any profession you have the different levels of caliber where if you're looking at the overall culture of the the restaurant industry, you're going to have the chefs with like their pressed uniforms and their long aprons and shiny black shoes and chef toques and things, and then in other kitchens you'll have people just in t-shirts and shorts and socks and kind of thing, and both of them are great. I think for myself I was drawn to the former of those, and I don't know, the whole thing was, it was kind of like a different breed altogether, where it was, I don't know, you were like a tight-knit family, and wherever you worked, it didn't really matter. And it's one of those things where travel would also be not just recreational, but a way to further your career. And you can further your career learning certain cooking skills straight from the source, right? Traditionally and authentically. So it was kind of, I don't know.
Absolutely.
that was my overall first impression, but
it's a beautiful impression. Kitchens, they can deliver a lot of different things, and it depends on where you work. And I feel like your first experience is always going to shape you a little bit. So what was that first restaurant you worked in?
My first restaurant, there was several, but
okay.
It was
the first one you want to mention.
Okay, yeah. The first one I worked in was called the Schmaltz Country Inn, and it was a very small place in Mildmay, Ontario, and that's where I started as a dishwasher and a line cook. But I did learn some very cool, very fundamental. Now that was a lot of French cuisine, but learning demi-glace for the first time, right? Learning handmade pastas and soup tactics that I actually still use today, sandwiches and soups and salads. And I think actually working at that place with the German fella and my uncle, that kind of spurred me to go to culinary school. So
that sounds like an incredible place to start. Like to be serving a range of cuisine and making it by hand like that. I can only imagine that was just an incredible experience. And like, so when you were there, like, was it one of those environments where it was really conducive, like, to learning? Were they?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was very. They played a trick on the first day. They said about 2 words to me, and they gave me a whole list, a list of things to do in about an hour. So this little kid comes in, and I was like, oh my God, you're tall, and I think they gave me way too much, like. They just kept giving me the evil eye, and I'm just sitting here picking up this knife that I've never. I was like, Jesus, I got to do this and this one, and and I was sweating like visibly, and I don't know how they kept a straight face. So then after the hour, they just burst it laughing, and I was like, "You swines, how dare you!" So of course, there's a lot of tricks you can, play on the people. I'm guilty myself, but beyond that, it was very. Very welcoming, and absolutely, like, you make a mistake, that's fine, we'll fix it this way. You make the second mistake, you get a towel whipping or something. The third time, it's a pretty good talking to, but usually you get it on the first try, or the first mistake, I should say. So,
that's it. And I find that people that are going to survive in kitchens are the ones that they can learn from their mistakes. And I mean, it's when you're messing up, and hopefully you can catch it and like, hey, how can I fix this? Because a lot of times there are fixes, even if it's not going to end up in an ideal product, it's still going to end up in a usable product, or it's going to be usable in another form or context. The people that don't last long are the ones that think they're always right, and that's not a mentality that's going to work unless you were just a born chef, which I'm sure there's some people like that, but most of them you have to learn.
Not the average employee.
No.
And also too, I mean, I've actually worked at the Michelin level when I was traveling, and I traveled for about 7 years, and it was I think it was 6 different countries, and wow. There was a few places that were, the head chef. It was like being on, Gordon Ramsay, where it was just it was either just very quiet or screaming, and the quality of food was excellent. It was amazing, and that's why I stayed. But teaching and instructing based on fear only goes so far, and like intimidation. Do you know what I mean? It's not as long lasting. Like there's no longevity to that, and it's a lot more motivating to tell people they did a good job when they've done a good job, and not just expect it and not say anything. Do you know what I mean? They need praise, but so I've seen both ways to do it, and a long time ago I promised myself I would never teach people like that.
I hear you. I never thankfully had to work for a screamer. I've only heard the stories, and I can imagine it would just be absolutely soul draining. And like in cooking,
and if you think about it, if you think about it too, I mean, if you have to, if you're screaming that much, you're doing something wrong perpetually. So this shouldn't be a problem every day, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And one of those things that I think, going back to what we were talking before, is one of the areas I find that people don't really think about in terms of kitchens is how much teaching is involved. It's because you're constantly relaying information to the next generation, to the people that you're working with, the people you're working under, even the people you're working beside, just teaching new techniques and things. Was there a moment that made you want to become an actual professor?
Probably 2 reasons. One is a little bit more easy. So I would say the first one is that the general public, as far as I know, the people I talk to, they have an attention span of about a minute to 2 minutes if you're talking about cooking. It depends. And you don't even have to be into like the scientific aspects of it. Like it can just be regular cooking. And after about 2 minutes, they wander. And I mean, my mom and dad are the same way, right? I'll talk to them. Oh, what are you doing? It's like, 2 minutes, 2 minutes to get through, these bullet points. And suddenly you have these students who are, they'll hang off your every word. They're dedicating their time and their money, and they always want to hear more stories. They want to learn about more skills, and it was a perfect match. I mean, they'll follow you right down that rabbit hole, and until you as far as you want to talk, right? So, and as far as you want to show them. The second one was actually someone that I work with named Richard Hendy, and 20 years ago, so 20 years ago, he was actually my sous chef when I was doing my my cooking apprenticeship, and that's how I met him. So we kept in contact and during the traveling and all that sort of thing, and I eventually moved back to Canada, worked in Toronto for a year, and then I was working in Gananoque on a pastry station, doing some really cool stuff. And and he was working at St. Lawrence for the culinary program at the time. So once a year, we would meet up, usually in Gananoque, and we would discuss like, oh, what's going on with you, and what are you making these days? The kitchen life and the stories and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, all the fun.
Yeah, and once a year he would drop this thing and he would say, based on how you're talking and the conversation we're having, you can see where this is going. Yeah, like, you should eat. And I'm like, I ignored it for the first 2 years, I think. And the third year that we met up and he mentioned this, I'm like, man, you keep mentioning this teaching. He goes, the way you're explaining it, I mean, you should give it a shot. Yeah. So, the third year I was like, okay, well, maybe and I ended up getting an interview for with the coordinator at the time. And but yeah, that's how it happened. It wasn't something that I set out for. I was fully intending to stay in the field for, as long as my entire career, I suppose. And at that point, I suppose I was cooking for about 13 years. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a big advocate for knowing why you're going to cook something. I always need to know the science behind it, because if it sticks in your head a lot better. And I tell students that too. If you are doing something just because a chef says or a recipe says, but you don't know why you're doing that step or that recipe or that stage in the formula, then you're not going to memorize it and it's not going to stick. But if you can memorize it, you have it for life. So I think, yeah, those two are the biggest things that got me into teaching anyway. So yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more, especially with the memorization stuff. I'm in school for accounting, and there's some of these things that they're throwing at us. It's way over my head at times. But if you can remember the why it's happening, because at the end of the day, everything you're learning, and I think St. Lawrence as a whole is great with this, it's teaching you why you're learning what you're learning. Because most of these things they have a quick way to do them, but by teaching the background knowledge, it really sets the information in. And I think that's really important, to actually being able to utilize the information you have rather than just parroting something out. And everyone can just use an Excel formula, or everyone can just follow a recipe. But you have to really know what's happening to understand why it is. And I think that's a really important part of learning.
Yeah, I find if you can kind of join them up, the theoretical plus the practical side, because there's a lot of students that are strictly practical, they hate the theory, and then there's the flip side of the bookworms, right, where, and I like to be both, but if it's something new, I really like to research it first and then kind of get in the kitchen and put it to practice, because then you're going to notice a lot of mistakes that the theoretical could never prepare you for, right? And vice versa. If something goes wrong in the kitchen and it's a practical application and you burn something all to hell or whatever, then you want to know why, and like, how did that color so fast? What went wrong? And yeah, so if you can have the two together, it works a lot better, I find. And I realize too that anytime, even if you're not in charge of the kitchen, or even the head chef or sous chef or station chefs or anything, even if you're an apprentice, you're still an example to other people in the kitchen. People are watching you regardless of your position, and yeah, this is why we were circling back to the behavior and the and your overall mood in the kitchen and everything. And that's so important. Even if you have all the skills in the world, you need to have that personality and be a team player, to be honest. So
I agree. And we're going to have a whole section we're going to talk about, but we've gone really long, so I've been really enjoying this conversation. I think that's going to be the note that we leave on today. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of shout out to the audience before we head out?
No, it's been great to be here. We always need more time for, you know, in labs and theory classes and things. There's so much we could talk about, but yeah. Yeah,
I agree.
I think that's it. So.
Well, we'll have to have you. We'll have to maybe bring you and Jeff Henny on some point. We can